This week's Torah reading. The name of the reading is called Balak, which was the name of the king of Moab at the time, who hired Bilam, who was as the sages call it, he was a prophet for the nations, but a very different kind of prophet, evidently. Although what's fascinating is about him is even though his moral stature was quite low compared to the prophets of Israel, but his prophecies were extremely deep and mysterious. And that's a fascinating thing. He said he prophesied some of the most, far-reaching prophecies about the Messianic age and things very close to maybe even points that the later prophets didn't touch. So that's really fascinating. But some points to think about in terms of this relationship between the nations and Israel that's represented in this narrative. And also just in general lessons that we can learn in terms of our own divine service from particularly the story of Bilam. I think a few weeks ago, I mentioned that the sages say in Ethics of the Fathers that Bilam had very bad character traits. He was very arrogant, and he was envious, and he was very greedy. In fact, and we see those things in this week's reading, in that Bilam, in his reference to what he believes, he kind of winks at Balak in terms of what kind of a prize he's looking for, what kind of a fee. He talks about a house full of gold and silver. That's a lot of money. So he's someone who has, who's tremendous greed. And so the first thing that I'm wondering is, how does this person, why does God make him a prophet? Why is he picked to be a prophet? Should have been Job, and it's another thing. Did he live at the same time as Job? We actually know that during part of his life he did. I mean, our sages say that Pharaoh kept counsel with a number of members of the prominent members of the nations at that time, and Job was there, Bilam was there, and Jethro was there. He was asking them advice whether he should persecute the Jewish people, the children of Israel at the time, or not. And if I remember correctly, Jethro said no. Bilam said yes, and Job was silent. I think if I got that correctly, and some say that's why Job was punished. Anyways, there's different approaches. But why was Bilam given such a gift? I mean, this is an incredible gift here. He's given the gift of prophecy. Truth is, I don't have a clear answer, but as my typical approach is, the lesson learned is that evidently, very often God gives the nations tremendous gifts that they're not necessarily entitled to, that they have innate gifts they're given. And one of the reasons maybe is, it says here, because it says that, well, the nations would complain. How come they weren't given a prophet? So God gave them a prophet. So in other words, it wasn't given to Bilam in his own merit. It was given due to some type of to create an equilibrium between, to equal the playing field between Israel and the nations. And then it goes on to say how he abused this. I guess my point is, it got me thinking about was that Well, just in general, that the children of Israel are judged more on their merits, and the nations are maybe given some natural talents that not based on any particular, judgment, but just maybe based on other things. Anyway, this is something we see here. Balak has this gift, and we don't see that he should merit to have such a gift. In fact, the opposite is true. I guess this is also a cautionary tale in a certain sense, in that, if the basis of it is this spiritual rule of spiritual science, that if on the side of holiness there's a certain power, on the side of impurity there's also going to be a certain power. So in other words, we can't judge by who is stronger. In other words, might does not make right, so to speak. We shouldn't be wowed by certain, gifts that certain people have, for example, who seem like they're undeserving, because the reason that they may have that is out of some type of a spiritual balance that has to exist. In other words, what I'm saying is that it shouldn't surprise anyone that if people who are not, don't seem to be very upright people, maybe even wicked people, that they're given power, maybe they're given wealth, they're given beauty, they're given intelligence, because both sides, the side of purity and impurity, are given these things. And so this is the way of the world, that the other side should also have these things. So it shouldn't surprise us. And another thing that stuck out to me in this reading just is the insistence despite failing again and again, the insistence on trying to curse Israel. There are so many times that Bilam that God hinted to him, that sent him omens, this is not a good idea. But he kept trying, he just kept at it. He kept at it again and again and again. He just couldn't stop himself. He kept going. And same thing with Balak. When Bilam blesses Israel, he gets upset, but he takes him to someplace else. Bilam says, let's go somewhere. And he goes somewhere else. And he goes somewhere else. And they try in another place. And even though the first prophecy of Bilam to Balak was, this is a blessed people, you can't curse a people that's already been blessed. He still tries again. He doesn't listen. He tries again and again. It's incredible. What's the idea of this? But I mean, one of the points is that there's this deep misunderstanding you see by these people of the nations, a deep misunderstanding of God, right? I mean, the truth is we see this, really in our own cultures also. In other words, what I mean to say is, they seem to believe that God can change his mind. He's now saying that, why don't we go somewhere else? If we go somewhere else, we'll appease him and he'll change his mind. There's a lack of understanding that God doesn't change his mind about Israel or about anything, but he's not going to change his mind about Israel. And this is something, that's what God tells them. This is the people that has been blessed from the beginning. You can't curse this people. It's so embedded in God's plan. And that's something that there are those in the nations that come to try to eradicate, they try to, upend this idea. I'll bring you another example of something that you see, in the world as we know it. Bilam, he says, let's go here and let's offer up 7 offerings. And Rashi comments, because he says, let's offer of the 7 offerings. Why do you say of the 7 offerings? So Rashi comments, he's talking about we're going to meet head to head with the patriarchs' offerings. They offered 7. Altogether, he said, I'm going to offer the same that they all offered. They each one offered 2 or 3. I'm going to offer the whole 7, the equal of all of them to put together. It kind of reminds me of kind of like, the idea of you saying, I'm more religious than all of their forefathers. They each one didn't offer 7. They all together offered 7. I'm offering 7, opposing all of them, equivalent to them all. Of course, this is not successful. But isn't it interesting? Because this is also this concept that sometimes we find of, that this idea of we're more pious than Israel, or parts of our religion that do more than they do, and we are a replacement. God has found favor with us. We do more than they do. We're more religious than do we pray. I don't know how 5 times a day, 6 times a day, 7 times a day. They only pray 3 times a day. Whatever it is, they. And you'll see certain other things like that in other religions that are similar to Judaism, where maybe in certain areas they'll try to be more stringent in something. What's the main message of the story of the donkey speaking to Balak? Simple message. It's a very strange story. I don't like what's the idea of the donkey speaking to him? Like, what was the need for this miracle that the donkey should speak to Balak? What was the message? Like, what was the lesson? What was the need for it? What does it teach us? I mean, maybe before we get to answer that question, we'll just quickly point out an interesting fact about the donkey crushing Bilam's foot against the wall. The animal stopping. First he's and then finally animal just sits on the ground, and Bilam's smacking it, and he's smacking it, and he's smacking it. He's so angry at this animal, and then finally, the donkey tells him, why are you doing this to me? Have I ever been disloyal to you? And then God shows him. Then God opens his eyes and he sees the angel. So, obviously, I think there's an obvious lesson to all of us. There are times in life that we're all like Bilam on a donkey, in that, we see our life going in ways, and we're being led in ways that, are just seem completely irrational. We don't understand why this is happening, that is happening, but the reason is because we're blind from seeing it. That is the point here. He was unable to see the reason why the animal, was doing these things to him. And instead of thinking, there's got to be a reason here, I wonder what the reason is, he didn't trust. He only saw what he saw, and to him, from his perspective, this was stupid, and this was rebellious towards him. That's all he saw. All he saw was the animal crushing his foot, as if it was doing it. But the reality was the animal was doing it to save him, just the opposite of what he thought. And I think that's the message there, is that there are things that are hidden from us, just like the angel was hidden from Balaam, of the reasons why things are happening to us, which are really to our benefit. We don't see them. And our assumption is to get angry at those around us, or to get angry at God, heaven forbid, and say, why are you doing this to me? Why are you crushing my foot against the wall? I don't understand this. And really, the reason is because there's an angel, threatening our lives right in front of us. We don't realize it. So that's an important message. I mean, I think the simple message directly to Bilam from the donkey had to do with the fact that, he was telling him, um, don't be arrogant about the fact that I speak through you. I can also have, I can, I can speak with, I can have a donkey speak. Don't think you're something so special. The donkey can also speak if I want the donkeys to speak. And that really, I think it added to a lot to humble Bilam. I don't know if it happened right away, but again, he doesn't accept it right away. He doesn't immediately. He just keeps on his way. It's quite incredible. And I guess you could say the same thing about, to a certain extent, parts of the nations as well. So it's like, despite many signs about the Jewish people, they still keep trying to. I mean, take the situation with the Arabs in Israel today. How many times did they try to destroy the country? But they keep trying again and again and again. Like, when are they going to learn? And it's caused, of course, sure, there have been times that they've caused a lot of harm and they brought death and all this. They brought tragedy for sure. But ultimately, they failed. They keep failing again and again, and they keep trying. It's a little bit like Bilam, in which he tries, every time he tries, to curse, the Jewish people are blessed, and you think he's learned a lesson, but he doesn't. He keeps trying until finally at the end, no, he gives in to blessing Israel. But what's amazing is after that, our sages, well, we see it. After that, he still doesn't give up. He still doesn't give up. He gives the plot. He gives them the plan to seduce, Israelite men into sinning. So he still doesn't get the message. It's unbelievable. So, I mean, Bilam is not a servant of God in any way. But it's unbelievable that he has this relationship. He has this revelation of God, but yet he's unmoved by it. And that is something that is, tragic. Alludes to his doom in the end because he's killed. He dies by the sword eventually. He's slain. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a continuation of this unbelievable message, unbelievable. I mean, what's the lesson? I mean, the lesson is not to be this way, but the danger, I think, of of the nations, that there could be this stubbornness, I guess, about this point. What's also interesting is that the fact that Bilam, was living a life that was immoral in many ways, as the sages tell us. In fact, even that, I think there's a reference somewhere that the donkey was also one of Bilam's mistresses or something like that. I mean, this donkey. So, I mean, this is an immoral person. But I think in the end, like, he's punished not really for his own immorality, but because of his hatred for Israel and because of his attempts to cause them harm, and he's punished. Which is, I think there's a hint to this somewhere here. I'm trying to find it. There's a word that Rashi tells us. There's hints to his doom. See if I can find it. I don't know if I can find it at the moment. But the point is that it's actually this act over here, this whole story of Bilam turning himself into an arch enemy of Israel, that leads to his true downfall. And So I think that's an important message also. But I think it's also they have this misconception. Bilam and Balak, both of them, I have misconceptions about God. One of them I mentioned before, which is the fact that God can change his mind. um, it's clear that Bilam doesn't comprehend that God is omnipotent. He doesn't understand that God is, omnipresent, omnipotent, and the only true existence in my mind. He doesn't understand these things. He has an encounter with God as a power in the world, but he doesn't understand that there's none other. It's not something he comprehends, not even close. In fact, God misleads him even in terms of God's knowledge, right? And God comes and says, "Who are these people?" Which leads him to think, "Oh, the things God doesn't know." Now, obviously, if the idea of knowledge comes from God and everything comes from God, that conclusion is impossible. So, Bilam doesn't really understand God, and the things he says, all these great prophecies, are not coming from, as I said before, Bilam in his own merit to be a prophet, but they're coming. He could just, like I said before, like from the mouth of the donkey. Bilam himself is like the mouth of the donkey because he doesn't merit. It's not in his own merit that he expresses these prophecies, and you see that from the fact that as soon as after he says them, he goes back to his old ways again. So he hasn't been affected at all by any of this. Any questions or comments on anything so far? The ideas. Yeah, then there's the idea that Balak thinks that maybe we can get them from another side, from another angle, maybe we can get part of them. So certainly, the deep mystery that Israel is central to the world and the world's future is something that Bilam completely doesn't understand. Okay. Any comments? Thoughts?